I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. So great to chat to you. Thanks so much for taking the time. So maybe we can just kick off with a brief intro to The Wild Robot for people who don't know anything about this amazing new animated film. What can they expect going in?
I think it's a really beautiful story about family, but also not only the family that you grow up with, but also found family, and this idea of being more than you're programmed to be and moving through the world with kindness, and something that I think really touches everybody that watches it.
And of course, it's your first time scoring an animated film. When they first approached you, whether it was Kris, I don't know, himself, about the idea of doing that, what was your first thought? And was it something that you had any hesitation about? Or was it something, you know what, this is a new frontier, this is a new exciting project, I can't wait to jump in?
Yeah, I was really excited. I mean, it went back to even childhood for me because I grew up watching cartoons a lot, but I started to realize the power of music in media watching those cartoons because I watched a lot of cartoons that didn't have much dialogue, like thinking about Tom and Jerry or Looney Tunes or the early Disney cartoons, realizing how much of the emotional journey you're experiencing through the music was something that really captivated me when I was a kid. And I also actually wanted to be an animator when I was a kid as well. So when they reached out to me, I mean, I was such a huge fan of Kris before meeting him, and that was such a huge honor. I remember seeing the concept art for the film and being so blown away with what they were going to do visually, with how it was going to look. Yeah, so for me, it was something I was excited to jump into, both musically, but also that childhood animation fan in me.
And where on earth do you begin? I mean, I guess because it's obviously adapted from Peter Brown's book, so maybe that would be a starting point. But you like you say, how much did you already get to see how the animation was going to look? Hear, any of the cast doing the voices, so to give you kind of a jumping off point.
Yeah, so I started with the book. They sent me the book before I had my first meeting with Kris, and I actually read it mostly to my daughter. My daughter's only 5 months old when I started reading the book. I connected with it so deeply because I was going through so much of the experience that Roz is going through in terms of learning how to be a parent, and something my wife and I talked about a lot in those early days. When I first joined the project officially, they really had the concept art that gave a really good idea of what it was going to look like in its final iteration. But as far as the film's concerned, it was all like storyboards, like black and white pencil sketches, and cut together in the shape of the film itself. But when I started writing music, I was writing to those black and white pencil sketches. So a lot of my approach was trying to get to the core of the emotionality, talking to Kris about each of the scenes, the characters, the overall themes, how those things would arc over the course of the film, and starting to write some of the music to those pencil sketches so that by the time the animation came in, we had a lot of time to iterate and craft things to picture.
And kind of getting into the nitty gritty of, so I think 80 minutes of music that you created. What were some of the first points, that you wanted to start with? I believe like sort of the main theme, and then moving on to sort of some of those, like Roz's theme and some of those crucial scenes like the migration scene. So what was kind of the order, and what was your process amongst that?
Yeah, so the first thing I did was try to find a palette for the film, like thinking about the sound of it. So I started looking for a way to represent the wild that was something that I hadn't really heard before. I did some digging and found this percussion ensemble called Sandbox Percussion that approach percussion more like sound designers or like Foley artists, where they're playing everything from metal buckets and like metal pipes to wood blocks and an oxygen tank, like pretty random things that they build these percussion sets with. And being inspired by that kind of led me to start writing this almost ASMR type of percussion that would live on top of the orchestral stuff that I also wanted to do. And then at the same time, I was doing some digging into synth design and making some synth sounds that would represent Roz in this futuristic world, but trying to find a way to balance that organic meeting of the synthetic that we find in the story, finding ways to do that with the score. And then thematically, the very first theme I wrote was the main theme, which my first approach was during that migration sequence. And the reasoning is just because two things. One, I always watch a film and try to find the most emotionally visceral scene for me, the thing that I react to involuntarily emotionally, just because I find that like that's the most resonant place to start for me in terms of finding a sound for it. And so that sequence really just spoke again to anything I can imagine with being a parent and what's going to happen when I, think about dropping my daughter off at college and saying goodbye to her. And so my first theme was trying to capture that. And it was a lot of trial and error. But when we found it, a lot of what kind of cracked the code for me was thinking about the complexities of that, and it really just took me down this rabbit hole of thinking about the complexities of what's going to happen with our relationship, the fact that no matter how hard I try, I'm going to fail as a parent, and thinking about things that she's going to have to accept about me, and all of that stuff. I think was the difficult emotional work that kind of helped me get to that main theme.
And of course, then we've got this incredible voice cast, Lupita right at the center of it. And I've heard her speaking about, the fact that she actually had to put a lot of thought and time and energy into thinking about how the character, evolves from the beginning. It's something that does sound a bit, like Alexa, that we're used to hearing this very kind of programmed electronic voice, and then turning into something that sounds much more human, much more emotional. So how much did like hearing her voice work then, influence the music that you were creating as well as the rest of the cast?
Yeah, I mean, so much. For me, I think of myself as an accompanist first and foremost. It kind of goes back to my background as a jazz pianist. It's like trying to figure out how to best play behind someone and fill in the spaces and have this dialogue and this conversation between music and what I'm hearing them do as the lead. And so hearing how Lupita was going to approach Roz's voice definitely changed everything from the register that I'm going to write in, or the instrumentation and all of that, and thinking about how she's going to start adding warmth to her voice over the course of the film, and that would impact the way that I approach writing music emotionally, but also thinking about that same trajectory for Roz's theme, where the first time we hear it, it's really like literally commercial music that's playing out of her speaker when she first comes online, and that's her theme, but it's presented in this kind of optimistic way as well, but then trying to make sure that that has the space to be malleable and still work in this more tender way when we see Fink talking about her during the truce moment, or at the very end of the movie when she's saying goodbye, like making sure that that theme has some flexibility in that way. And then with Fink, I think just Pedro's voice has like this, even though Fink is such a sly character, like Pedro's voice has this like sweetness to it a little bit that also was really influential in how I approached that, and wanting it to have this like a slyness to the way the music was written. It's kind of got this like jazzy quality, but at the same time, it's a little light. Like it's not like dark and heavy, because I feel like the way that he approached his voice work was really light and more almost silly than anything that was like dark and mean. So that definitely affected the way I approached the music for him as well.
And either in the making of it or when you see the finished product now, do you have a favorite scene or a favorite character that the theme that you've done for them? Which is your favorite moment?
Yeah, in terms of favorite character, I think that it's funny. I would say Fink, but also Pinktail is a pretty funny character. It's not that much with her, but there's definitely some moments that make me laugh pretty hard, even to this day. Scene wise, I really feel like the migration scene, I think, just stands out to me, just because it's something that I remember playing it for my wife and my daughter early when I was working on it. And it's the type of scene that even on its own can make me cry. Like it made my wife cry when she watched it. And even my daughter at 2 years old was like asking where the little bird went and why the little bird flew away and all of this. And so I think there's so much emotion in that sequence. The way Kris talks about it, he said that Roz is running toward this emotional cliff that we actually literally see in the context of this sequence. And so it's just so baffling to me that it's one of those movie moments that even picked out of the film is just so visceral and emotional. So that one stands out for me still.
And I guess in terms of the takeaways from the film, I mean, it just feel like what I love is that it kind of has sort of the background style of the animation. It's like this softer, more painterly approach. And it's sort of combined the older cartoons I feel like I grew up watching with this very kind of modern, computer generated animation. And I think that also reflects that it's something that can really appeal to kids, but also adults as well, in terms of those themes of parenthood and community. I just think there's a lot that can resonate with lots of people of different ages.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to try to take that approach with the music as well. And that when I saw that they were going to be inspired by those hand painted days of animation, I also wanted to make sure that this score honored the high level of musicianship for those compositions and those composers in those days, because you had some of the best classical composers writing music for that space. And for me, I always get excited about having this full orchestra playing my music, but they're the best musicians in the world, so I want to make sure that they're playing stuff that they feel excited to play. And Chris Sanders told me in the very beginning that there would be these moments where music would be a character in the film, and that we'd not hear any dialogue, and it'd be mostly music carrying that emotion. And so wanting to make sure that the music was as active as possible, and really rode that line between being supportive but also very active and evolving over the course of the film, and it being something that people could listen to outside of the context of the film and still find it to be enjoyable. And so yeah, I really wanted to try to my best to have that traditional approach, but bring it into this time period as well, with the addition of synths and this modern percussion and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, you've done a bit of everything now, from likes of the Green Book and the Color Purple, but also Bridgerton. What have been some of your other highlights aside from this project, and what's for you next?
Yeah, I mean, Bridgerton's always a big one for me, just because it's so fun to write that music, and again to have music that's similar to the Wild Robot, unapologetically melodic and thematic and emotional, and for that movie, for it to be something that got a lot of young people excited about classical music and excited about picking up a classical or a string instrument or something like that. And then also I always think about my work with Ava DuVernay, just because that's stuff that's so personal to me, and means so much in terms of how those projects speak to my own experience, thinking about When They See Us or Origin or any of the movies I've worked on with her. And what's coming up next, it's really just riding the high of this movie, and being excited about people seeing it. Now people get to watch it at home, and it's the kind of movie that people are going to watch over and over and over and over again. And so to be a part of something that people are already embracing that way just feels so special. So just kind of riding the high of that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And like you said, can't wait for everyone else who hasn't seen it yet to see the film. I took my 4-year-old to see it in the cinema, and
Oh
he
my
was
God.
6. So yeah, you've got the next generation into one of those films they're going to remember forever. So congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.